This happened only a few months ago from the time I'm writing this. I work an overnight shift at a warehouse, so my whole life runs backward compared to everyone else's. I sleep during the day and I'm awake from around 6 p.m. until 9 or 10 in the morning. Even on my days off, I keep the same schedule so my body doesn't get thrown off. That night, I got off work at 4 a.m. I drove straight home and pulled into my driveway around 4:15. The roads were completely empty. No headlights, no other cars, just silence. As I approached my house, I noticed a car parked right next to my driveway. I slowed down as I passed it before turning in, trying to get a better look. It was an old black sedan with heavily tinted windows. I couldn't see inside at all. All the lights were off. I pulled into my garage and parked, but before heading inside, I glanced down the driveway one more time. The way my neighborhood is laid out, there's a decent amount of space between each house. Usually, if someone is visiting, they park directly in front of the house they're going to. There were plenty of open spots along the road, so parking right next to my driveway felt unnecessary. At first, I brushed it off. Maybe someone was visiting my neighbors. Maybe they had people over earlier and the closer spots were taken. About an hour later, before going to sleep, I checked through the window again. The car was gone. The rest of that day went normally. I slept until around 6 p.m., got ready, and left for work. When I pulled out of my driveway, the car wasn't there. I didn't think about it again. Until the next night. When I got home again around 4 a.m., that same black sedan was parked in the exact same spot. I did what I did the night before, slowly drove past it, trying to see through the windows. Still nothing. This time, after parking in the garage, I walked straight up to it. I put my hand above my eyes and pressed my face closer to the window to block the glare so I could see inside. The car was empty. No one in the seats, nothing that gave me any kind of explanation. It was one of those situations where it felt really off, but nothing was actually happening to me, so it wasn't obvious what to do. I went back inside. The first thing I grabbed was my phone, which I'd left charging on my nightstand while I was out walking. That's when I noticed a notification. It was a motion detection alert from one of my security cameras. For context, I had one camera on my front porch that only faced the door, so it would only trigger if someone was standing right outside. I also had 3 cameras inside covering the main rooms. The notification didn't say which camera detected motion. I opened the app. There was a 60-second clip saved. No music, no dramatic pauses, just steady, intimate delivery. Like you're telling someone what really happened and you still don't fully understand it. Let the fear come from the story itself, not your voice. For most of the video, nothing happened. The room was completely still and silent. I started to think it was just a glitch. But in the last 5 seconds, something moved across the very bottom of the frame. It was fast. Only part of a head and shoulders were visible, and only for a fraction of a second. My hands went numb while I was holding my phone. The footage was from my bedroom, the same bedroom I was standing in. The silence in the house suddenly felt overwhelming. I could hear my heart beating. I slowly turned around, scanning every corner of the room. They could be anywhere. They could be watching me. I knew I had to leave. I rushed toward the doorway and stepped out into the hallway. Immediately, I heard movement from the bedroom behind me. By the time I reached the stairs, I could hear footsteps rushing down the hallway. They were maybe 15 feet behind me. I ran to the front door, threw it open, and sprinted straight into the woods without looking back. In that moment, I didn't care who it was. I didn't want to see them. I just wanted to get out alive. Eventually, the only sound I heard was my own footsteps in the leaves.
I called 911. When the police arrived, the car was gone. Thankfully, I had taken that picture of the license plate the night before. It took them about 3 hours to find and arrest him. He was in his mid-20s and looked completely deranged. There were multiple photos on his phone of my house, some taken through the windows at night, including pictures of me sitting in my living room. He had notes tracking when I left and came home from work every day for the last 2 weeks. What's even worse is that we still don't know how he got into my house or how he avoided the cameras. If he managed to get inside unnoticed once, there's no way of knowing if that was the first time. With how long he had been stalking me, he could have studied where the cameras were. It's possible that the clip from my bedroom was just the first time he accidentally stepped into view. This was 4 years ago, but I still think about it sometimes, especially on stormy nights.
It was storming really bad that night. I was working as an Uber driver at the time, and whenever the weather gets like that, it usually slows everything down. Sometimes I don't even get a single ride request. Still, I always stayed out. Even a couple trips were worth the extra money. For the first hour or so, I was just sitting in an empty parking lot, listening to the rain pound against the windshield and scrolling on my phone. Every now and then I'd start the car and drive around just to stay awake, then park again somewhere quiet. Eventually, I drove through a fast food place, grabbed something to eat, and went back to waiting. After a while, I finally got a notification. Someone requested a pickup. I opened it. They were about 25 minutes away from me, and the drop-off was another 20 minutes from there. Usually, when that happens, it means I'm the only driver even remotely close. No one else is out working in the storm. I didn't have anything better to do, so I accepted it. The drive there felt longer than 25 minutes. Maybe it was the weather. Maybe it was how empty the roads were. At some points, it almost felt like I'd forgotten I was even going to pick someone up, like I was just driving aimlessly into the dark. The GPS started taking me farther and farther out of town, into areas I'm not even sure I'd ever driven through before. No houses, no gas stations, just long stretches of road and trees bending in the wind. By the time I reached the pinned location, it had been closer to 35 minutes. It was at the corner of 2 roads, but not a normal intersection. This was 2 roads in the middle of absolutely nowhere. Trees on both sides, no buildings, no lights, nothing. And no one was there. I marked that I had arrived and just sat there, scanning the area through the rain. I couldn't understand why someone would be standing out here in the middle of a storm. After about a minute, I looked down at my phone to text them. That's when I saw movement in my side mirror. Someone was walking up behind my car. I have no idea where he came from. I hadn't seen anyone standing by the road, hadn't seen headlights, nothing. He opened the back door and got in. He was completely drenched, water dripping off his clothes onto the seat. His expression looked off, not scared, not normal, just disturbed, almost angry. "You order the Uber?" I asked. He responded by saying my first name. That confirmed it was the right passenger. I started driving. A few minutes passed in silence. He was sitting in the middle of the back seat instead of behind one of the front seats. That meant every time I looked in the rearview mirror, he was right there, staring forward. Something about him felt wrong. I wanted to ask why he was out there in the rain, in the middle of nowhere, but I also didn't want to start anything. Eventually, as we drove deeper into even more isolated roads, I decided to say something. "So, what brings you out here?"
especially with the storm and all. I kept my tone friendly. I looked at him in the mirror. His eyes met mine for a second, then darted away. He looked like he was about to answer, but he didn't. He just stared out the window. That silence felt heavier than if he'd said something weird. Then he started shifting slightly in the seat, looking around more, watching me through the mirror. It was unnerving trying to focus on the road while wondering what he was doing behind me. Suddenly he spoke. "Drop me off here." We weren't anywhere near the original drop-off point. In fact, we were on another empty stretch of road surrounded by trees. I started to say, "Are you sure?" He cut me off. "Drop me off here." He sounded firm, almost demanding. Something was clearly not right, and I wanted no part of whatever it was. I pulled over. He reached for the door handle, but paused. His eyes shifted down toward my phone on the center console. The Uber app was still open. He hesitated. Then he pulled out his own phone and looked at it. And in that moment, I could see it click for him. The app had his full name, his account, everything tied to him. Whatever he might have been thinking about doing suddenly wasn't so anonymous anymore. He glanced at my phone again. I decided to speak quickly. "Don't worry, I'll cancel the ride on my end. You won't get charged." I said it casually, like I wasn't suspicious at all. In reality, I was hoping that if he thought the ride was canceled, maybe he'd think his information wouldn't be saved or linked to anything. He stared at me for a few seconds. His eyes looked cold, angry, almost empty. Then he opened the door and stepped out into the storm. Within seconds, the rain and fog swallowed him. I didn't wait. I drove off immediately. I had no actual proof that he was planning anything, no evidence, just a gut feeling. But I still reported the entire interaction to the police that night. You never know. A few days passed. Then I got a call. Someone had gone missing that same night. They were last seen near the forest, off the same road where I had picked him up. The police asked me to repeat everything that happened. I told them every detail I could remember. They searched, but they never found the missing person, and they never found the man I picked up either. The storm had washed away any possible tracks or evidence. As far as anyone knows, I was the last person to see him. Sometimes I think about how easily that night could have ended differently. I think I got very lucky.
This happened on what I thought was going to be a completely normal weekday. It was early April, and it had been raining constantly around here. My job is half indoors, half outdoors, so when it rains, everything becomes 10 times more exhausting. By the time my shift ended at 6 p.m., I was drained. The rain hadn't let up at all. I drove the usual 30 minutes home. I live in a more rural part of town, kind of tucked away. My driveway is long and mostly dirt and gravel, and with all the rain, it had basically turned into mud. As I pulled in, I noticed something strange. There was another set of tire tracks in the mud, fresh ones. It looked like another car had driven all the way down to my house. At first, I didn't think much of it. Maybe a mail truck, maybe someone accidentally turned down the wrong driveway. But when I got up to the house, there were no packages, no mail, nothing on the porch. The tracks showed that whoever came down had done a 3-point turn near the house and left. It was odd, but I shrugged it off. Inside, I changed out of my soaked work clothes and went into the kitchen to make something quick for dinner. It was around 7:30 when I thought I heard a knock at the front door. Just one knock, soft. With the rain and wind hitting the house, it was hard to tell if I'd actually heard it. I walked across the house to check. When I opened the door, wind and rain blew straight into my face. No one was there.
I stepped out just slightly and looked around the porch and driveway. Nothing. I shut the door before I got completely soaked and told myself it was probably just the weather messing with the sound. I went back to the living room, turned a show on, and scrolled on my phone. About an hour passed. Then I got up to use the bathroom. When I stepped out of the living room, I noticed something that stopped me. There was a small mark on the white tile floor. Mud. Just a little bit, but enough to stand out against the clean tile. I hadn't worn my shoes through the house, especially not muddy ones, and the spot was right behind my couch, which was weird. The couch faces the TV, so the entire rest of the downstairs is behind it. You wouldn't normally walk back there unless you were behind someone sitting on the couch. I grabbed a rag and wiped it up. I tried to rationalize it. Maybe I'd tracked it in earlier without noticing. Maybe it was nothing. But I couldn't shake the feeling. It crossed my mind, what if someone else was inside? I immediately told myself I was being paranoid. Still, the feeling didn't go away. I went to the bathroom and came back to the couch, but now I couldn't relax. I kept glancing over my shoulder. The entire downstairs was behind me in darkness. It started to feel like when you watch a horror movie and convince yourself something is standing just out of view. Eventually, I couldn't take it anymore. I turned off the TV and went upstairs to my bedroom. At least up there, my bed was against the wall. Nothing could be behind me. I turned on the small TV in my room and tried to settle down. About 20 minutes passed. I was finally starting to calm down when I heard something outside my bedroom door. It wasn't loud, just a dull thump.
I got out of bed and walked to the door, pressed my ear against it. Silence. I stood there for a few seconds, trying to build up the nerve to open it. Finally, I did. The hallway was empty, quiet. The only other room upstairs is a spare bedroom that I use as a kind of office/library. I figured if I wanted any chance of sleeping that night, I had to check everything. I started walking toward it, and then, out of nowhere, the TV downstairs turned on, full volume. The same show I had been watching earlier. The sound blasted through the house. My heart felt like it dropped into my stomach. I sprinted down the hallway and down the stairs. The entire first floor was dark except for the flickering light from the TV. No one was visible. I stepped slowly into the living room and hit the button on the back of the TV to turn it off. The silence that followed was worse. Was it a glitch? Or was someone actually here? All the little things from earlier started lining up in my head. The tire tracks, the knock, the mud. I went into the kitchen and grabbed a knife. Looking back, I probably should have called the police right then, but in the moment, I kept thinking if someone was here, they wouldn't get there fast enough anyway. I checked the entire first floor. Closets, corners, behind doors. Nothing. No movement, no sound. I started convincing myself it was all just random, unrelated things. I walked back upstairs. The hallway felt different now. I reached the spare room and slowly pushed the door open. Everything looked normal at first. Then I saw something on the floor near the closet. It was the remote for the TV downstairs. My stomach dropped. I hadn't brought it upstairs. I backed out of the room immediately, ran downstairs and out of the house while dialing 911. When the police arrived, they found more signs that someone had been inside. One of the downstairs window locks had been broken.
They think whoever it was probably came down my driveway earlier while I was at work, maybe knocked to see if I was home. When I didn't answer, they left, and then came back later and broke in, which means they were inside the house the entire evening, quiet, moving around while I was there. When I went upstairs, they must have grabbed the remote and turned the TV on to distract me just long enough to slip out. Nothing was stolen. That's the part that bothers me the most. There was no clear reason for them being there. Sometimes that feels worse.